17th of November. 25 years. 25 years of my life I spent at that godforsaken job. I put all the extra time and effort into that place, and today, of all days, they decide to fire me? I'm far too old now to be looking for a new career. What am I going to tell my wife about this? I can't tell her. I need to figure something else out and get a new job or something before she notices. I know I can do that. 19th of November. So much has changed. So much has changed since I last looked for a new job. All these websites for it now, and all these technology these younger kids are using now. What happened to the old days where you could just walk around with a paper resume? I mean, where you could step into a building for a place you wanted to work at and just talk to the boss, hand him your papers, and if he liked what he saw, he'd just say something like, "Let's give you a shot, son," and then you'd start on Monday. I always thought that it would be easy to find jobs after college. Even this long after, the search continues. 20th of November. I got it. Or at least an idea for something I can do until I find a real job. I need to have money coming in so that my wife doesn't find out that I got fired, right? She's always so damn supportive of me and I'm so scared of disappointing her with this, but I have an idea. So when I was thinking about how I figured it would be easier to get a job after having gone to college, it got me thinking about college. See, I was a damn good poker player back in college, and well, there's a casino a few blocks from my house with poker games available. Now, I wonder if I still got what it takes to win some money, at least enough to make up for my missing paychecks. 21st of November. I did it! Last night, I won enough to cover my next 2 paychecks. At first, I thought my entire plan was going to backfire. My anxiety was through the roof as I entered the casino last night. I kept fighting with myself over this being a good idea or a terrible decision. I started by playing a few blackjack games to make myself feel more comfortable sitting at the card table in the casino. I won after 3 hands, but those first 2 losses, they nearly caused me to leave and call the whole idea off. I know I gotta do something while I wait for my callbacks from those applications that I've sent in so far. I've been sending them in, trying to find a real job, but I have to say, once I sat down at the poker table, it was a rush of a feeling. Just like that feeling I had back in college. I can't get risky with my plan, though. I need this to be profitable if it's going to work. And luckily, patrons I was playing with, they didn't seem to know how to play very well, and they had very obvious tells, so I had some easy games. Love you so much, Lydia. I promise I'll make this all work out. Tomorrow I'll start going in during the day, while I normally would be at work. 22nd of November. I walked into the casino earlier this morning. Walked directly over to the poker pit, found a seat at one of the tables that I thought looked promising. I know it's not good to judge people or judge a book by its cover or whatever the saying is, but with poker it's kind of a necessity, I chose a table with only 3 other people sitting at it, all of which came across to me as people that were more for the novelty of saying that they had played at a casino. Not because they were big professional players, An older lady was wearing what looked to be the same dark glasses that you would see at someone that was blind. And there was a man with an expressive face that looked far too happy to be there. And finally, there sat another man. The last man at the table was going to be my challenge, I think. He wore dark sunglasses with almost a matte-looking finish to them, a stoic expression. He looked like he knew the game well. And let me know that, although this might be the easiest-looking table, it was still going to be a challenge this time. It was a bit of a setback today. See, I won a hand or 2 throughout the few hours that I sat there at the table, but ultimately I lost nearly half of what I made yesterday. I knew I had to start playing smarter because I was already trying to play it safe. Playing safe might be boring, but I wasn't there to make it big or become rich. I was on a mission to make just enough to cover my old paychecks so I could find a new job. Having made enough to cover 2 checks the night before and today, losing half of that, I once again started worrying if I really had what it takes to make this plan work. Surprisingly, the player that I had the most trouble with was the old lady. Mr. Too Many Expressions was just as I expected him to be. Easy to read. The man I expected to be my biggest problem turned out to be easier to read than a children's book. The old lady, on the other hand, well, she'd seen some shit. She knew exactly what she was doing. Underneath her jovial exterior was the skills of a seasoned poker player for sure. Tomorrow I'll have to do better. I'll need to tap into the old me, that old Dave that I used to be in college. Ruthless and completely unable to be read. 25th of November. Okay, I think I have a pretty good system down now. Each day, I make my way to the casino and play until I've won enough to cover how much I would have made that day at work. Now, it might only be about $100 or so, but it's all I really need. And I don't want to get greedy for fear of falling into my own hubris. I know it's been a few days since I wrote something in this journal. I know my therapist says I need to keep consistent with it and that it'll help me keep track of my thoughts throughout the day. I decided to tell Lydia that I'd stay home with her today. She said that she hadn't been feeling all that well lately. I know I've been gone quite a bit lately, but I feel like she should have told me that she didn't feel well before now. I mean, I understand her line of reasoning, though. She's always so helpful and supportive of everyone else. She feels like if she ever has any problems, she'll be a bother to everyone else. I told her many times to let me know anytime she needs help, but her overly hospitable nature just won't allow it. She says that she just feels weak. She's been having a few headaches. So luckily, I think it might just be a cold or something, It felt amazing for me to be able to sit with Lydia all day, take care of her. The woman really is my whole world. It kills me to hide from her the fact that I lost my job, but I think her disappointment in me would kill me more. We laid on the couch all day watching movies and just spending time with each other. Something I feel has been far too long since the last time we did. She tried to hide that she wasn't feeling well, but having been married for 20 years now, I could tell what she was feeling. She'll get better in a day or two. Nothing some cold medicine can't handle. 27th of November. I've been falling into a steady groove lately at the casino. I come in early in the morning, I play until I've won a couple $100, and then I leave. Nice and simple and safe. However, it has been a couple of days, and Lydia still doesn't feel very well. She might even be getting worse. She scheduled a doctor's appointment for tomorrow, which I fully agree with. The only problem is that, well, once I lost my job, we no longer have insurance. And, she doesn't know that yet. I have to go a little harder at the casino to cover the doctor's visit. This might be working for now, but I really wish I could get a call back from one of those applications. 29th of November. I'm having a rough time knowing what to do. I mean, I must admit, I'm in full-blown panic mode right now, and I feel like my entire world is falling apart. We spent nearly the entire day yesterday at the doctor's office. Test after test after test was taken, and as the doctor walked into the room that last time, there was no holding back the flood of tears between Lydia and I. The look on his face told us everything we needed to know. It was far from just the cold or the flu that I was expecting it to be. They told us that Lydia has cancer. We've both spent the rest of the day at home together in our own versions of quiet shock. The doctors told us they wanted to start aggressive treatment very soon, so we had the best chance to get rid of it. I need to think of a new plan to pay for all these treatments. No matter how much you expect the worst, there's no measure for how much something like this truly changes your life. I'm going to need to spend the rest of the day sitting and mostly crying with Lydia. We must battle, we must win. She's everything to me, and I refuse to lose her to anything. 30th of November. I don't like the idea of having to play any more daring than I have been. So the concern for me becoming addicting to gambling is very low, but to make the amount of money I need to pay for Lydia's chemo treatments, I'll have to start betting bigger and taking more risks. Even with knowing how much money I could be making, the thought of also being able to lose as much and setting myself behind was terrifying for my situation. I looked online today to get an estimate of how much each session was going to cost. I had to have some base idea of how much I would need to make before each chemotherapy session. The amount was much higher than I expected. It seemed nearly insurmountable without insurance. I have no idea how I'm going to pull this off, short of living at the casino. I've heard recently at the casino about some upcoming tournaments or something like that. Maybe that'll help take the pressure off if I can just win it. A terrifying thought just hit me, so I'll write this down. They say that people going through treatment like the one that Lydia's going through completely drain the person afterward, right? They get very sick. They get weak after each session, from what I hear. And that means that I'll need to be at home taking care of her after each visit, which in turn is going to allow me to spend less time at the casino. So I'll have even less time to make the money to pay for the treatments. That means I'm going to need to win big each time, which in turn plays bigger and riskier. Ultimately, I feel like I'm completely screwed. Lydia has her first treatment in 3 days. I need to make as much as I can before then and hopefully find out more about this upcoming tournament. 4th of December. Nearly the entire time Lydia was getting her first treatment, I was talking to billing, explaining that we didn't have insurance and that I'd be paying for all of it myself. The lady from billing was nice enough. She was a shorter blonde woman that looked to be somewhere around her mid-30s. In exchange for bringing each payment into each individual treatment session, she agreed to avoid saying anything to it around Lydia. At least nothing that might arouse suspicion as to the status of our insurance coverage. At first, she had no intention of cooperating. However, once I placed the cash for the first payment on the table, she gave in and she agreed. It was so much worse than what I had expected when we finally arrived back home. She was nauseous and weak. She sat telling me through tear-filled eyes that she felt like she'd been hit by a truck. She sobbed in my shoulder, telling me how sore and exhausted she was. It was so hard for me to see the woman that I loved with all of my heart crying in such excruciating pain, knowing that there was nothing I could do truly to make it better. It hurt me to think about it. But in the back of my mind sat the idea that I very urgently needed to get back to making money for the next treatment. Yeah, I did have a little bit of time before the next one. However, when you're trying to make money by gambling, you need all the time you can get just in case something goes wrong. I had a very short amount of time, when putting into perspective, to win thousands of dollars. I knew I needed more of a sure thing, something that would guarantee me at least a few payments worth. Playing against the novice players and the drunks during the day worked well. I was always better than they were, and always made some money. However, it was so slow building any significant amount of winnings against them. I needed a few big games, although bigger games meant better players. And better players meant higher risks. Higher risks of me losing. However, I need to find a balance between those risks and the ability to play the game well enough to pay those hospital bills. I think I'm going to go to the casino tonight and ask about that tournament. The one that I heard that guy talking about. In my luck, it'll turn out to be a tournament based on a game more focused on chance. Something like blackjack or craps that I have absolutely no interest in. Regardless, though, I'm going to do some digging tonight and see what I can find out. 5th of December. I walked into the casino at just past 11 last night. I walked in to see crowded tables with drunk and excited patrons pouring from the tables into the slot machine area. I always hated the slot pit. Lights, flash, bells, and chiming whistles and beeps and chirps. Constant sound of the lever being pulled or the place bet button being smashed on. Constant roar of the drums and tumblers spinning. The sound of people both winning big and losing it, all simultaneously from opposite ends of the pit. Always found that playing the machines using nothing but false hopes and dreams did, nothing to sate my need for challenge and proper games. Yet, beyond my own opinion of the pure luck nature of slot machines, the pit was filled with people hoping for that one magical pull that won them all the money they could dream of, never realizing the odds are forever against them. I had to press myself between people as I made my way towards the card game area. Cheers and boos erupted from various blackjack tables, while the poker table corner remained relatively quiet. The casino seemed to be filled with much more serious players tonight, in all sunglasses, bringing their best poker face to the table. I got distracted at first, watching the games, trying to pick up on people's tells in the event that I would ever play against them. Just after a significant win by a shorter Asian man wearing round, mirrored red sunglasses, my memory sparked that my true mission was to find information on that rumor of a tournament. It didn't take me very long before I found a server walking past with a tray full of drinks. I stopped her and asked, "Excuse me, miss, but I heard something the other night mentioning something about a tournament coming up. Do you have any information about that?" Without even a breath of hesitation, she pulled a little half-page flyer out from the pouch around her waist and handed it to me. Once the paper was in my grasp, the server turned around and walked away without speaking a single word. I wasn't sure how to feel about it. On the one hand, it seemed rather rude, but on the other, I had no idea how rough her night might have been. I quickly brushed it off and looked at the flyer in my hands. Master Hand Poker Tournament, December 10th and 11th, $10,000 buy-in. First place, $100,000. Second, $75,000. Third place, $50,000. Fourth place, $25,000. Fifth place, $10,000. I could feel my eyes widen reading this. Lydia's next round of treatment was the day following the tournament. This was exactly what I was needing. Winning first place would put me in a position to cover the next few treatments, but to make the amount of risk even worth it, I would need at least to come in fourth. My confidence in my abilities wavered slightly as I glanced around at the tables filled with all walks of life. I realized that these people were not just gambling at a casino tonight, they were all practicing for the tournament. I quickly realized that I should have found out about this tournament much sooner than now. I was days behind in practicing than those other people. I should have been here, betting low, studying tells, and playstyles of what would undoubtedly be my opponents in the tournament. I frantically looked around the room at the tables. My brain was screaming with dread as I looked for a table with an open chair. When I realized it, my heart sank in my chest. The people standing around the tables weren't people just watching the games, but instead were people waiting in a sort of line to sit and play. I looked at my watch, and seeing how late it was already, I knew that I wouldn't be able to stay and wait my turn. I was going to need to come back tomorrow and hopefully show up early enough to get a table. Instead, I decided to stick around for a little longer and study the players at all the tables. As I looked out over the tables of players, my eyes grew less interested in the players themselves, but instead at the other onlookers. In particular, a man standing at the back of the crowd, who wore a gray suit and dark black pointed goatee with a mustache that had been waxed and curled up. In truth, he looked like a cliché James Bond villain, but he also looked very rich. However, something about his hollow yet piercing eyes prevented me from looking away. He gazed out over the players, staring as though he were looking for a specific person. He gave me the impression that he was some sort of scouter, like the ones that showed up to a high school football game looking to recruit players for their college. With him, however, I couldn't shake the feeling that his intentions seemed more nefarious. Next to him stood three almost identical large men in dark gray trench coats. They stood expressionless, not looking at the players or the crowd, but somewhere off in the distance. The only distinction I found between the three of them was that one had a cigar and one wore a dark gray fedora. Suddenly, the four men simultaneously looked in my direction. More specifically, they looked directly at me. I quickly averted my eyes back to the players in the pit. When I finally gathered the courage to look back at them, they were all gone. Also, the point, it looked like they had never been there at all. I quickly scanned the room, and I couldn't see them coming towards me or moving anywhere, at least it mattered. After that strange moment, I decided it would be best to make my way home. 6th of December. I've always seemed to have a knack for reading my opponent, a drive to study people and behaviors. It's been very helpful in my life for various sales jobs and at particular moments in my life, very helpful when playing poker. However, for situations like the one I currently find myself in, the studying part of it feels like it takes entirely too much time. Overall, I feel like I did rather well. Made a decent amount of money and took a plethora of mental notes about various players and their tells and their body language. The only problem with all that was that I had no way to tell if I was playing against other people that were entered into the tournament or just daily casino patrons. For all I know, I could have just spent 3 hours studying the wrong people, and I wasted my time. Before I went home for the night, I sat at the bar for a while, continued to watch the players. A disheveled man sat next to me, mumbling something into his glass. Most likely, he was too intoxicated to be playing whatever game he was interested in, and lost a bunch of money. Now that, however, was only my best guess, because I couldn't actually hear anything he was saying. I decided to order a drink, and as soon as the bartender poured it and walked away, the man reached out and set his hand on my forearm. I couldn't help the shock and offended look that presented itself on my face.
"Who am I?"
the man said with a rough, gravelly voice and a terrified look on his face.
"I can't remember. I lost it. I lost. Who am I? What's my name?"
"How would I know?" I responded, extremely confused.
"Can't remember. I can't remember. I can't remember,"
he began to repeat as he removed his hand from my arm and returned to his nearly empty glass. I watched him. I studied him for a minute. Tried to figure out both what he was talking about and what had happened to him without asking him any questions, knowing that would start another conversation or a series of rambling. Sadly, he began rambling at me without me provoking him.
"This game I found, I played it. Takes things from you. Things you can never get back no matter how hard you try. Don't lose. You'll forget it forever. You can never win your own back. Always someone else's. Someone that lost before."
"What are you talking about? What game?"
Have to go. Have to try and win it back. Win back who I am.
Hey, what game? What are you saying?" I asked again, beginning to get angry. The man never responded, but instead leapt from his chair and hurried off through the crowd and out of the casino. Couldn't help but sit there bewildered, and my mind felt like it was going to catch fire with how hard it was trying to make sense of anything the strange man said. I finished my drink, and just before I got up, I noticed the man had left a card sitting in his place. Not a complete card. It looked like it had been set on fire, put out, after having been burned away a good portion of it. Only a few numbers and a handful of embossed letters remained on the card, indicating that it had once been an address to something. I thought little of it, threw the remainder of the card into my empty glass, before standing up and leaving. Something about that man was haunting me. I had a lot of questions about this game he was talking about. At the same time, though, a part of me had an almost unspeakable level of apprehension, like that feeling you get before stepping out onto your roof, something like a primal feel of falling. It was like that, the kind of feeling that grips your spine and just doesn't let go. 9th of December. With the tournament being tomorrow, my nerves are beginning to grind. I feel so unprepared for it. I should have been studying the players, playing more games of significance to prepare myself for weeks before now. Thoughts of doubt and just a general sense of, what the hell am I doing here? Flooded my skull as I sat down at the table for what was going to be my final game before the tournament. It was getting late. I had already spent hours sitting at tables playing hands and filling my head with mental notes about people just in case I needed them. Filling my head with so much new information seemed to trigger the strange man's words from the other night. Can't remember. Played in my head in his rough and scared voice. The table was rich. Some younger YouTube celebrity or something. I wasn't sure what he did to get his wealth. A mid-20s lady that had little skill, but from what I could tell, was just playing with her daddy's money. A 40-something, scruffy-looking guy that clearly hadn't slept in days, His demeanor seemed to tell me that he was trying to win back some money he owed someone. The patchy stubble covering his face, mixed with the traces of white powder crusted around his nostrils and bloodshot eyes, told me that he wasn't going to be much of a threat. You can't think or play effectively when you're strung out and haven't slept. Then there was Charlie, or Charles, as I heard a few people address him. A white suit trimmed with gold buttons and a matching cowboy hat. He was significantly older with a white goatee, and if I had to be honest, he looked almost exactly like Colonel Sanders if someone had put a cowboy hat on him. He looked like an old southern plantation owner. He had the accent to match. The man was a complete donkey. Worst kind of player. No matter what he had in his hand, he would raise, try to bully people off the table every chance he got, which worked out quite well at getting rid of the other players, leaving just the two of us for most of the hands. I wasn't about to let Dusty Trail Colonel Sanders scare me off. The few times I had seen him show his cards, he had absolutely nothing. I couldn't afford to keep playing marginal hands. I didn't have the luxury anymore. Now it had become somehow personal to me. He was one of those people with more money than a god, who couldn't care less about $1,000. I wanted to take him down more than anything, and the only way I was going to do that was to catch him out. My time finally came when I got dealt pocket rockets. 2 aces. I was last to act, and as usual, Charles decided to bully the table. He bet big, $100. I looked at the other players and knew my time had come. The girl folded almost immediately, with the YouTube guy taking a second to think about it before they too folded their hand. And re-raised to 200. It was just me and him. He stared me down and started blathering as he had nearly the entire game. I gave him nothing in return. I just sat there, not breaking eye contact, as my mind screamed. He asked me how much I had left behind me. I told him 1,200. He played with his chips, and with a shit-eating grin, pushed all in. He had me covered. I couldn't contain myself. I pushed my chips in, and with my heart racing, I bet half my mortgage. I stood up. I flipped my cards. He flipped his cards. And as usual, he had nothing. 2-7 offsuit. The worst poker hand. His bullying tactics had failed him against me. I remember my mind screaming at me as the cards were dealt, and again, when it was over, Charles sat staring at the table. We both knew the money didn't affect him, but the fact that he lost plastered a look of intense fury across his face. I took the chips and cashed them out. Another month of mortgage, plus some spending money. I was doing well, but in my adrenaline-soaked state, I couldn't keep playing, not tonight. Not after making an enemy out of Cowboy Colonel Sanders. I just needed to go home, get some rest, and spend time with Lydia before the tournament tomorrow. 10th of December. Surgery. We went to a doctor's appointment this morning, and after only a few treatments of chemo, they wanted to skip ahead to surgery, try to remove as many of the tumors as they could. It's going to be very expensive. I did my best to appear like that didn't bother me. I mean, I didn't even know they could switch their minds so quickly from chemo to surgery, but that's what the doctor said. I'm scared of the bill, but I'm terrified of what it will do to Lydia. I mean, that woman is my whole world. And without her, I don't know what I would do. Now, even more than before, I need to win this tournament. And with this news right before I play, I can't guarantee how well my head will be in the game. There's no turning back now. 11th of December. The players of the tournament were surprisingly easy for the first half. The skill and challenge came towards the end. I mean, maybe I just got lucky with my hands, or maybe my ability to read people gave me a severe advantage. Either way, yesterday, the first day of the tournament, seemed easy on me. Today, on the other hand, was a rush of adrenaline and anxiety. Play after play, hand after hand, I did well. The tables had been consolidated down to 5 tables of 5 players. The winners of those tables would sit at the final table. I could feel it getting close. I'd done so well so far. My heart pounded inside my chest as 2 of the players at our table busted out of the tournament, leaving me with one other decent player and my toughest opposition yet. He was experienced and a good player, but he was loud and he was cocky. He was very showy. And I'm sure it was a device that he used to conceal whatever tells he had. I remained calm as best I could as the 4th card came out, and I had made a flush. With the ace-high flush, I was virtually unbeatable. I had been quiet the entire night, though. Couldn't make a big play, or I would scare everyone off. I had to check. Thankfully, the loudmouth couldn't stop blinking as he gloated and constantly talked. I knew he was excited. He must have also been on a flush draw. I had the nuts, though. The best possible hand. I just had to keep him happy, and he would send me to the final table. He raised. To my absolute surprise, the man next to him that had been calm and seemed to be playing safe all night called an insane raise of $1,000. I put my head in my hands and mumbled audibly to myself. I didn't want the smile in my heart to show on my face. I acted frustrated, then slowly counted out $1,000 in chips. When the last card came out, I peeked at my cards, but only for a second. I knew I had the best hand, but still, I checked. I knew the cocky loudmouth across from me was going to raise. Probably the second best flush. That's a hard hand to fold. Sure enough, he pushed another 1,000. The other man in the hand folded, and he came back to me. I found it odd that he raised so much, then folded so quickly afterward. I finally looked at the sinister smile plastered on Loudmouth's face and pretended to check my hand. "You're not the guy, buddy," he said, laughing. True sign of absolute confidence in his hand. "Maybe I'm not," I said, checking my chips on the table. "Are you going to call if I re-raise?" I could see the greed in his eyes. I pushed everything I had. He called me without a second thought. Just as I guessed. He had a king-high flush. But I had the ace-high flush. "Why the fuck would you limp that whole hand with a nut flush?" he said, standing, balling up his fists. "I knew you'd do my work for me," I said, scooping up my chips. I did it. I won the table and was moving on to the final table, which meant I would at least be winning my buy-in money back. I smirked to myself as I gathered the chips and prepared to move, and suddenly he charged across the table and sucker punched me in the eye before being grabbed by a pit boss. Out of pure reaction to being punched, I swung, but I didn't hit anything. Loudmouth was removed from the casino, and I could stay inside and keep my 5th place, but I was refused the right to play at the final table. Instead, I sat in the audience, fuming with anger that Loudmouth had stopped me from getting a better position in the tournament. After watching the first couple of hands of the final game, I decided to retreat to the bar, partially to get some ice from the bartender, partially to get a few drinks, hoping that it would calm me down. As I sat watching the last table from the bar, someone in a voice barely above a roar in the casino spoke to me. "Why is it that you play, son?" I looked behind me to see through my quickly swelling eye. An older man, very expensive gray suit, peppered hair, waxed mustache, and pointed goatee. An annoying but sly look on his face. Even though he was now wearing deep red, circular sunglasses, I recognized him as the man in the crowd from the other night. He leaned a little closer and repeated his words. Something about him felt both off and comforting to me. He made me feel like we were long-lost friends, and I couldn't help but be honest with him. "Well, sir, my name's Dimitri, lad. You may call me as such." "Oh, okay, well, Dimitri, My wife needs some very expensive treatments and surgeries. You see, she has cancer, and I can't beat the thought of losing her, so I'm doing whatever I can to pay for it, I said as I felt tears well up in my eyes at the very thought. Well, my boy, I believe I know just the game for you. What do you mean? I'm really only good at poker, I said. Ah, yeah, I saw that, he said with a sinister smile. It is precisely that. Poker, that is. However, the stakes may be unusual, but I promise you that if you win, you'll have everything you need to take care of your beloved wife. Where is it? I said, looking around the room. Not here, he said, extending his right arm and presenting me with a card. It's in another location, somewhere that is a little off the beaten path, so to speak. It is invitation only, and that card in your hand is your invitation. When's the tournament? No tournament, but a series of games with very high stakes. With that final sentence, the man stood and walked off, disappearing into the crowd. Nothing about the man or the conversation felt good to me. Something about his demeanor made me feel like if I turned my back on him, he'd rip my soul from my body. Talking to him felt as though I was making a deal with the devil, and I couldn't describe the horror and anxiety that filled me as he spoke. I looked down at the card. It simply had an address written on it in a strange, foiled font. The letters glistened and reflected the overhead lights as I moved the card back and forth in my hand. Suddenly, my brain made a connection, and I recognized that it was just like the burnt card the disheveled man had left at the bar before. I tried my best to recall what the man had said that night, because his words now seemed to be much more important than they were before. His warning of, if you lose it, rang in my ears. 12th of December. There was a blank steel door in an alley, which was my first red flag, telling me that I should probably turn around and walk away. The address on the card from the strange man led me to this dark alley in a mostly abandoned part of town. All around me were decrepit and crumbling warehouses and old abandoned stores. I was frustrated at the thought that this was all just a prank or some sick joke. My heart pounded against my ribs, angrily telling me to leave. However, my desperation to save my wife and the man's words from last night, everything you need to save your wife, caused me to knock on the door. I stood for a few moments in silence and anger before I heard the latch on the other side move. The door swung open, revealing a very dimly lit flight of stairs leading into a short hallway. As I reached the far end of the hallway, I noticed it open up into a relatively large room. 2 poker tables sat in the middle, and chairs and couches lined the walls. A small bar sat near the poker tables with an old bartender behind it. The shelves of the bar seemed to hold bottle after bottle of the same brand of whiskey. Nothing more, no other options. A man looked very strung out, sat at the bar repeating the same phrase over and over. I can't remember. I can't remember. I can't remember. At first I failed to recognize him, but again, it was the man from the bar at the casino. His words of warning began to echo through my mind. Only one of the tables had players sitting at it, and oddly enough, seemed to be waiting for me to show up and fill the last seat before they began to play. The other players sat silently as I approached the table. Might I ask what the buy-in is? And is this some type of tournament with a big game? I don't mean to sound money hungry, but I was told winning here could pay for my wife's surgery. The players remained silent, but the bartender spoke to answer my question. There's no tournament, but instead of a series of games. Money's no object here. You play multiple games, you win some, you lose some. Once the first hand of the game is dealt, can't quit until all games are played. If you win more than you lose, your wife will be taken care of. If you lose more than you win, you'll never be allowed back in. I stood next to the table for a moment, just to feel how strange and eerie the situation around me felt. I needed to do whatever it took to get my wife's surgery paid for and have her taken care of, So regardless of how strange the rules were, I was going to play. Just before I began to sit down, having made my decision, the bartender spoke again. Rules are simple. Stakes are high. Each loss comes at a price, while each win will grant you a new experience. That statement seemed both strange and obvious. However, the way it was worded grated against my nerves. I began to sit down and simply nodded my response with the bartender interrupting me for the third time. Do not sit! You have 24 hours to make your choice. Your first game, if you decide to play, starts this time tomorrow night. Now, you must go. I stared at the bartender, visibly confused. After a few seconds, everyone in the room looked away from me, or through me, as if I was a ghost, floating through the ether. Even making noise and shouting received no response from anyone else in the room. A few moments of being treated like I was invisible caused me to finally give up, and I walked back out and headed back home. 13th of December. I walked back through the door exactly on time. My nerves raised to intense levels, knowing I had no way of studying the other players, mixed with knowing that the surgery was tomorrow. I sat down at the table. Before I could say a word, the bartender placed a drink in front of me. The only thing they offered. Whiskey on the rocks. A monstrous cigar protruded from one of the other players' mouths as thick wisps of cigar smoke rose from the lit end and into the air. The sight of the cigar caused me to realize that the three men were nearly identical. They were the same three men that I had seen with Dimitri in the crowd. They were still only distinguishable by one with a hat and another with a cigar. In front of me sat 5 white chips, same as the other 3 players at the table. Wait, I said before the dealer began handing out cards. What are these? And where do I put the buy-in? My questions were met with blank stares and stoic expressions by everyone at the table. Without answering my question, the dealer began to pass out cards. I sat quietly and watched until the game was set, and the big blind began. I got a lousy hand. But being in a big blind, I had to protect it. The man with the cigar sat directly across from me. He called the blind. The other 2 folded, and the hand ran out. I lost, not making my hand, and the cigar man across from me won with an ace high. I remember noting this. A strange feeling washed over my mind as the game ended. It was like that feeling you get when you think you may have forgotten to turn the oven off. The man with the cigar made no expression, no excitement over his win. He just simply closed his eyes as he slid another single white chip from my pile to his. I can't express the amount of confusion that filled me and how unusual this game was. Apparently, after the entire game and the loss, all I lose is a single chip? A chip that I still hadn't been told the value of. For all I knew, the single chip could have meant that I lost my house, or that I had lost $1. The bartender said that the stakes were high, but never told me what they were. In fact, nobody told me anything about this game. The 3 other men at the table were nearly robotic. None of them spoke a single word the entire game. They made no expressions, no ticks, no tells, no emotions, which made them impossible to read, leaving the entire game simply to chance of the draw of the cards, and hopeful guessing. It was as if they were bound to the table, forced to play endless amounts of poker games for all eternity. They seemed like lifeless zombies. It was completely unfathomable how truly uncomfortable the entire situation made me. However, I was there for a reason. I was on a mission, so I refused to let it bother me to the point of quitting. With very little time or hesitation between games, the dealer began to pass out cards again. After the first game, I gave up on speaking while playing. Every word I said was met with nothing but blank stares and silence, so I felt no point in continuing to try and communicate. I can play the silent poker game too, I thought. In this game, I finally got a playable hand. I was able to win with only one other person in the hand. The win was against the man with the hat this time. Just like the cigar guy, the man with the hat gave no reaction to his loss. Pocket aces, always good poker odds. I needed more hands like that one if I wanted to pay my debt. He slid a chip towards me slowly. I reached out to take it from him, and as soon as my fingers touched and pressed the white plastic of the chip, a vision blasted through my mind. It was all I could see and all I could think of as it played in the theater of my mind. I was in a car that I didn't recognize, driving down an open road in the desert in a car I didn't recognize. It looked to be somewhere in Utah or Arizona, which is an area I've never been to. I looked to my right, and in my vision, in the passenger seat sat a beautiful blonde woman. She looked at me and giggled. I didn't recognize her, but in the vision, I knew her to be my wife, Stephanie. My body didn't look the same or even close to how it did before. I looked in the rearview mirror, and although I knew it to be my own reflection, I didn't recognize the face staring back at me. Suddenly, the vision faded, and I found myself sitting back at the dim poker table, the soft white chip still resting beneath my fingertips. I shook and gasped for air, screaming for an explanation, only to receive the same stoic silence that seemed to be the default in this place. I reached for my glass and I downed my whiskey. Nearly the second I placed it back on the table, the bartender replaced it with a fresh pour. I looked at the bartender with tears beginning to well up in my eyes out of confusion and frustration. What the hell is going on? The rules are simple. Stakes are high. You have 3 games remaining. With that, the bartender walked away, back behind his bar. Before I could say another word, the dealer began to deal the cards out again. A queen and 3 clubs were in my next hand. I felt good about this. I knew that it wasn't the best hand or even a great hand, but it was always a hand that I had been fond of. Somehow my hand held up, and like so many times before, it gave me another reason to like the queen and 3 combo. Again, I won. This time against the cigar man again. Again, the man with the cigar slid a chip towards me. I almost didn't want to touch the chip as it slid because of what had happened last time. As I reached out and I placed my finger on the chip, my mind exploded with another rush of visions. Scenes from a life that wasn't mine. Memories of a world I had never known. A young, dark-haired child was swinging on a playset in front of me. Palm trees lined the edge of the backyard, and a dark-haired woman lay sunbathing next to the pool. The child kept giggling as she repeated, "Push me higher, Daddy!" Before the game, I had never known these people, and knew that I had never been able to have children. After touching the chip, I suddenly knew them as if I had always known them. It was my wife, Janet, and my daughter, Kelsey. I looked down at myself, and I saw that once again I was not how I remembered, yet how I looked instantly became familiar to me. I saw my reflection in the water of the pool. Looking back at me from the reflection was the man from the bar. I had somehow become him. Screaming, I seemed to come back to reality. Once again, sitting with my fingertips touching the soft plastic of the white chip in front of me. My eyes darted to the bar to see the man remain seated there, just how I had remembered him. He still repeated his phrase, and the meaning behind those words began to click. Were those someone else's memories? Is that what you lose? Is that what you win? I nearly began to hyperventilate in my realization. What had they taken at my first loss? What was it that I no longer had any memory of? How is this even happening or possible? The man at the bar had been around for days. Is that what he meant by if you lose it? I clearly just won one of his memories. Had he lost this in this game to the point that he no longer remembered his family or where he lived? The dealer wasted no time in passing the cards back out again. Game 4 was about to start regardless of my pending anxiety attack. I was dealt a pair of 2s under the gun and decided to see it out. I knew I was beat when the first card came out. I braced myself for what I was about to lose. A chill ran up my spine and my heart, in my throat. Tears welled in my eyes as the strange sensation of losing something washed over my mind. I began to cry as I passed the single white chip across the table towards the winner. This time, the only guy without any form of prop or distinguishable accessory. I couldn't choose what I let go of or choose what to forget. When you lose, it just takes whatever memories it wanted, and there was nothing you could do about it. The worst part about any of it was that I had no idea what part of my life was being ripped away. It was just suddenly gone, and I had no way of knowing. I tried my best to go over in my head as many details and facts about myself as I could remember. What my name was, why I was there, everything. Sadly, there wasn't much that was coming back to me, and I didn't get much time before the next game. Again, without hesitation, the dealer began to hand out cards. It was the final game, and I already had 2 wins and 2 losses. If I won this game, then I would have enough money. Enough money to pay back the hospital, right? Yeah, that was why I was here. I have to pay the hospital. I got dealt an ace and a king this time. Oh, suit. I decided to play it out. It's not the best hand in the world, but as my pulse pounded, I was quickly relieved by hitting my straight on the 4th card. Nothing like hitting your out on the turn, I guess. I knew it was amazing. It was a huge relief that I had won, but I had very little emotion to show. My brain was too busy trying to pick out the pieces and figure out what I had forgotten about my losses. As the cigar guy slid the final chip my way, I hesitated and refused to touch it at first. I didn't want new memories clouding my ability to gain my old one back. I knew that it was of no use, though. The only way to get whatever was going to come back would be to win it back in this godforsaken game. I needed to go pay the hospital. I do remember that. Why did I need to pay them? I seem to have forgotten that. I don't know what else to do, so I'm going to keep playing until I can remember what it was again. I just don't remember. I can't 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 remember.
This journal was left at the hospital, along with a very large sum of money in the early morning, the day of my surgery. The nurses read through it and discovered that the money was for my surgery and that the journal should go to me. I thought of transcribing it here in hopes that someone out there may have seen my husband and can tell him to come home. I'm truly terrified that something may have happened to him. So I sit here in tears, just hoping that just one of you may have some information about him. And if you see this, I love you, Dave. Please come home.
Hey there, kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and thank you for watching tonight's video, or listening to tonight's podcast, and thank you for clicking the thumbs up, the subscribe, the follow, the bell, the whatever helpful thing there is on such a platform. If you want to find your nice Halloween horror audiobook to listen to this year, check out audible.com and look for MrCreepyPasta, because I got a whole bunch of books over there. Books like Tales from the Gas Station. And as always, I want to give a very big thank you to everybody who is supporting me on Patreon. If you guys have been supporting me on Patreon, or if you're considering doing so, then know that I just added in a couple of cool things for the loyalty program because I found out that I could. I had no idea that I could do that. So now, you guys should be getting some cool things in the mail brought to you by Patreon that are pretty cool. They support the channel as well. Oh, getting to the point though, a huge thank you to patrons such as Jordan Alexander Sanchez, Brian Arce, Bobby Karman, Stephanie Butler, Tristain Pelton, Chance Burnett, Diana Kraus, William King, Heather McDonald, Reaper61167, Alex the Sandwich, Darth Miver, Micah Ortiz, Satanic Aries, Ness69420, aisodoehtraed with 2 exclamation points, Nessie, Ronnie Hansen, Bardohawk764, Melancholy Corpse, Ferb, Harley, Billy Morrow, Madam Skullbunny, Sashi Suzaku, Grizzly Olsen.pro, Caden the Spooky Boy, Zane Nightshade, My Body Sounds Like Rice Krispies, Ashwood, Lord of the Weebs, Jay, Miss Xandra, Mr. Unsettling Spaghetti, Suji Campbell, Stricken, Azarine Fox, Fried Chicken 12, Freddy Krueger, Pie Nanny, Michael Scarborough, Infernal One, Lisa Cottrell, Caspian, Jordan Elves, Hades' Nephew, Tater Chip, Acid System, Prozac and Pancake Appreciation Society, Cryptic Nightmares, Kiri the Sloth, Tommy Green, Fester's Lampshade, Sky Harbor, Nina Smith, Nico Cayo, Rafael Rodriguez, The Ginger Bros, Aaron Stormcrow, Daniel Polson, Trey Smiles, and Corey Kenshin. Thank you guys so much, so much for being a part of the Patreon and helping me keep the lights on and helping me get exclusive stories and everything that we do on the channel here. Thank you guys so much for being a part of it. Thank everybody in the description, and thank you guys who have stayed to this part of the video. It really means so much to me. I hope you all have a very happy Halloween and sweet dreams.